And there, a lot of people think they have a handle on it, but when you go into retirement, most people have a finite amount of money. So you really need to get down to the brass tacks and make sure that you understand where your dollars are going.
What is a good retirement income? It's one of the quintessential questions of planning for a confident retirement and really needs to be examined from two separate angles. How much is needed or appropriate for your situation? And then what are the tools available to generate that income? We'll examine both sides of this important question today on Protect and Grow Chicagoland Retirement with Chicagoland's certified financial planning professional, Tim Stearns, CFP, founder of TJ Stearns Inc., and the home of the Protect and Grow Written Retirement Blueprint. And Tim, as you put together those blueprints, I am sure you have to answer and address this important question: what is a good retirement income?
Well, it really depends on each person, right? It can't be a cookie cutter situation. So what we try to do is make sure that we get down and really drill down into what people have, what they're going to need in retirement, and how we're going to get to that mark. And it's an involved process. I mean, it's nothing, it's not like we're splitting rocks here, but I mean, at the end of the day, it's intense. I mean, we want to make sure that you get this right. You and I have always talked about, measure twice, cut once. Well, on a retirement plan, you only get one shot at it. So you need to make sure that everything is done the right way.
Yeah, if you cut wrong from the beginning, it
Oh yeah.
impacts the trajectory of your retirement and the stability of your lasting financial confidence. So absolutely, Tim. And determining how much income is needed in retirement, an important aspect for pre-retirees to begin to figure out, but multifaceted, requiring consideration of lifestyle and longevity and inflation and taxation and changing spending and market conditions. So we'll talk about all of that on today's program. But ladies and gentlemen, to address this aspect of retirement, what is the good retirement income for you? To personalize and customize a plan, call TJ Stearns Inc. and get your Protect and Grow written retirement blueprint. It is one aspect of a comprehensive plan, and a lot of people have done a very good job in one or several aspects of planning. But if you don't have a plan that specifically addresses income, investments, taxes, healthcare, and legacy into and throughout the duration of retirement, then you have not completed the plan quite yet. And that's what Tim Stearns helps his clients do there at TJ Stearns Inc. So give a call, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256. So Tim, to start answering this question of what is a good retirement income, we need to arrive at a conclusion of the amount that we're likely to need. We need to carefully examine our essential expenses and our desired discretionary spending.
Exactly, and spell out what you spend in a month. And there, a lot of people think they have a handle on it, but when you go into retirement, most people have a finite amount of money. So you really need to get down to the brass tacks and make sure that you understand where your dollars are going. And the other thing I really enjoy is if both spouses are involved so that everyone knows exactly what they're spending. I think a lot of times one person, in my case, it was my mom. My dad made the money and my mom would pay the bills, and she knew where everything was and wasn't. And, that was really important. But I like to see both parties come in here. We'll get down to it, do a protect and grow blueprint, and show them this is how we're going to go out 30 more years where you guys can enjoy retirement.
Tim, do you deal with many people who have a very, very good handle on what we are spending, or in most cases are people sort of just guessing and don't really have a good idea? Because I mean, just some quick math here. If we're estimating we spend 6,000 and it's actually $7,000 a month, $1,000 a month there. Well, over the course of a 30-year retirement, that means we need about 360,000 extra dollars to
Dollars.
account for that. So we probably need a good handle on this. Do most people have it?
Let me break that down for you. I'd say about 50% of people uh, don't have a clue. Okay. and I make them do their homework. And I'd say 25% of them think they have a clue, but when they finally do the paperwork with us, or we go down through item and line item, they realize that they spend a lot more, to like the example you just gave. And then the last 25%, I'll say, have a good handle on it and they know what they're spending.
If we could be the best marksman in the world, right, Tim? But if we don't know where the target is, we're probably not going to hit it.
Right. I agree with that. And you need to make sure of that. The other big thing is, this happens time and time again. People come in here and say, I have X, I have Y, I have Z in my account. Is that enough?
Mm.
Well, the big thing is for retirement, and I don't know if everyone understands this, is literally paying your bills. Like, how are you going to do that? And we've talked about this before. I could have a $10 million account that's illiquid, and I don't get payments out of it. Well, that's not great. But versus I could have $1 million, let's say an annuity that's paying me out something every month guaranteed, that's a much better situation. We can do more with less with these annuities, like we've talked about. But I mean, the annuity isn't always the fail safe. I'm just giving that as an example.
Yeah. Well, I could have a $10 million portfolio, but if I'm burning through $1 million a year, that's
Right.
probably not going to last. Or I could
Right.
have a $2 million portfolio. And if our expenses are within reason, that is maybe certainly enough to last and insert, like you said, Tim, all very personalized to
Yeah.
our unique situation. But we do need to understand what our unique situation is. So we're categorizing expenses, right? The essentials, the subsistence survival level expenses, and then the discretionary expenses, the things that we want to do. We've got to separate but quantify both of those, and then kind of using that as a baseline. That's where you begin the process, and building on top of that things that might cost us money into the future, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have to look all down the road. I mean, that's one of the reasons I became a certified financial planning practitioner, is because I wanted to make sure saw, the full landscape. And the landscape includes Medicare, it includes Social Security, it includes taxes, and even legacy slash estate planning. So versus most of the people calling into the show, I'm realizing have maybe a money manager, and that's about it. And that money manager is telling them, well, yeah, the market went down and now it's back, but they're not really doing planning. And you need to plan for the future. You want to make sure that, both spouses, if you are married, understand exactly what things are going to look like if God forbid something happens to one of them. But hopefully they live a long life, and we would make sure that, they have enough money to pay for that by building the plan.
Well, we've tried to build the plan all along during our working career with our skill, our knowledge, or our sweat equity, paying those bills. Once we retire, it's the money that we've accumulated that has to pay those bills. And that's why it's important to go through this process and build yourself a blueprint, ladies and gentlemen, for how to do that. That is the Protect and Grow written retirement blueprint that is available there exclusively at TJ Stearns. And if you would like to get that put together with the help of a certified financial planning professional, Tim Stearns CFP is the point of contact, the main resource, but does have a team of professionals around him to continue to help along the way. Formulate the plan, execute the plan, monitor and adjust as time goes on and your life changes and the world around us changes. That is the benefit of having a relationship with a certified financial planning professional, and the team of resources that he has there. So get your Protect and Grow written retirement blueprint, or the conversation started on the way, by calling 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256. Tim, there is an ebb and flow over the course of retirement. The first several years, we're probably out and active and doing all the things that we want. And then things may slow down, but then inflation and healthcare expenses come into play and must be factored in. You are looking decades out into the future as you are
Yep.
designing these plans.
Right. And one of the things, to that point, I don't know if you've ever heard this phenomenon. They call it the smiley face of retirement. But to your point, it begins where you're spending a lot of money because you're going to do those trips that you never got to do, maybe taking the grandkids to Disney, etc. Then it goes down, and it kind of thins out there where you're not spending as much because you got the no-go, or you're going slow years, I should say. And then it starts to pick back up because of healthcare. And that's one of the reasons, as you said, we're looking decades in the future. We want to make sure that they've at least thought or made sure that they took care of long-term care in some fashion, that they're aware that that could be a huge blind spot if they don't cover it. And taxes and that sneaky silent thief inflation. We need to make sure we're watching all that. And I think a lot of people look at the here and now and they're like, well, I've got $1 million, so I can just do this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah.
And there's so much more to it. And I don't think a lot of Americans understand that.
The go-go years, the slow-go years, the no-go years, you're planning, Tim,
Yep.
for all of those as you are
Yeah.
designing this plan. Do you see a lot of people that have forgotten to include those potential expenses, taxes, inflation, healthcare, and kind of are projecting out maybe a too rosy a scenario into the future without really stress testing the the plan?
Well, let's give an example. I had a gentleman talk to us, and he had $2 million, and he said we spend about $100,000 a year, so I can last for 20 years, and he's investing in the market. And I said, well, what if the market goes down, 22%, like the average portfolio did in 2022? And, well, I didn't think about that. And these are things that we want to make sure that, they've thought about it. Maybe you still go down that path, but at least we make them aware of again their blind spots, and there's so many in retirement.
Yeah. On the surface, everything sounds good until you say, well, what if something goes wrong, right? And we
Right.
examine those assumptions very carefully in the planning process so that we're prepared for them if they are ever to happen in real life. We assess our retirement savings and investments and withdrawal strategies, and then we stress test and adjust for risks. And that's where we really begin to structure the actual income generation.
Well, let me ask you this. If you know that you can spend a certain amount of money because you have done a plan, aren't you going to be happier? That's what I think about. You don't want to hope, you don't want to, pray that to the gods that you're going to be okay in retirement. You want to make sure that you have knowledge that you'll be okay. And that's what we always talk to people. We'll use, a dividend plus paying dividends, to pay the bills. We have, also, annuities with some of the highest rates I've seen in my lifetime, 31 years in the industry. So there's a lot of great ways to solve the riddle of retirement, which literally is why I named my book Solving the Modern Retirement Riddle, because I think it is for most people to break it down to say, well, I've got 2 million, I'm going to spend $100,000 a year. Oh, I forgot that the market doesn't always go up. It is definitely something that should be talked about.
Well, again, ladies and gentlemen, that's why you need the blueprint to identify what your ideal vision is, what your goal is, but where could be the weak points and stress testing those and reinforcing them. The tools are important, right? The 401k, the IRA, the Roth, the brokerage accounts, those are important tools, but they in and of themselves, by themselves, do not constitute a plan or a blueprint. Bringing it all together, looking at income generation, efficiency, looking at investment, management, risk fees, looking at taxes and controlling, minimizing those where possible. How are you planning to address the potential cost of healthcare? And then how is the legacy going to transfer and impact generationally? All of these things are included and incorporated into a comprehensive plan, and that is what the Protect and Grow Written Retirement Blueprint consists of. If you'd like to get yours put together, pick up the phone, give Tim Stearns, CFP, and TJ Stearns, Inc. a call, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256. So, Tim, we've identified our expenses, we look at our lump sum, and now we have to equate the two, right? And look at the cash flow rate. I know that for 30 years or so, Wall Street has projected this supposedly sustainable cash flow, and they dubbed it the 4% rule. But it seems like that rule had a lot of holes and problems and was not always as sustainable as Wall Street wanted to project.
Well, to your point, Bill Bangin, the guy who came up with it, which we've talked about this before, he was talking about using it institutionally with, big pensions and that type of thing that they wouldn't run out of money. But that being said, he has found that his 4% rule uh, is fails 67% of the time. So he swears it off now and says, do not use that. Morningstar came back with a study that said it should be 2.8%. Wall Street Journal says it around 2% is safely what I can be pulling out of my 401ks, IRA, so I don't run out of money. And then Dr. Wayne Pfau, who has his doctorate in retirement sciences that we've had on here, says 1.49%.
Hmm.
So think about that. If I start out with the 4% rule off $1 million, I said, well, I can take out 40 grand a year. And now I'm down to $14,900 using the safest rate. I think that's a little much. So if you're just using the stock market, maybe you abide by those rules. But if you add in an annuity, once again, we can do a lot more with less. And that's why, for my wife and I don't have a pension. We're using an annuity to shore up our loose ends so that I have a guaranteed amount of income.
Where are those kind of cash flows landing, Tim? I mean, as compared to a 2.4 or a 4% cash flow. So $1 million with a 4% cash flow is $40,000 a year of
Yep.
income.
Yeah.
Where are you seeing these attractive rates that you're talking about with annuity payouts and income?
Well, I mean, fixed indexed annuities are one of them. There's a lot of great guarantees out there that would make me sleep better at night if I knew that, if the market's going sideways or down or up, it doesn't matter.
But you're
My
seeing
bill.
these higher than 4%, you're saying?
Oh, sorry. Yes. Yes. I didn't see where
No
you were
worries,
going
no
there.
worries. I
Definitely.
mean
Yeah.
that they are a tool that is available, and we will talk about several of the tools, right? Because
Yeah.
that's the
Sure.
second half of how to answer this question. But
Right.
if Wall Street is saying hopefully we should be able to get 4%, now we've
Right.
seen some problems with that, as
Right.
you stated. Many scholars have said, nah, that's probably not the way to go. But annuities seem to be paying out a more attractive rate, and we can leverage for that income. So where do those rates fall?
Well, Peter, we're seeing rates, it depends on your age, of course, and what the product is, but we're seeing them 5, 6%. I mean, the payouts are the best I've seen in 31 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, going from a 4% cash flow, Tim, to a 5, that's
Yep.
25% more income distribution
Yes, sir.
each payment
Exactly.
that we get to live off of. And now,
Right.
now the, there are many things that I respect about Dave Ramsey, but he recently actually took a whole lot of heat, Tim, for saying, oh, well, the market does 12, so we should be able to pull off 8%. And even his own daughter was sitting there next to him saying immediately, Dave, that probably is not the case. And then he got a whole lot of blowback on that online. Again, I love Dave Ramsey. I respect a lot about him,
Yeah,
but
he's got good ideas.
we can't sugarcoat it and project too high, or we are jeopardizing future years.
It's funny you bring up all that. In my classes, I'll say to people, I'll give them an example that people bring in illustrations that a different company has run, and they have it growing at 8% every year or something crazy like that. And I'll say, you guys are older than me, so you tell me, have you ever had a stock market that goes up 8% every year? I've never had that in my lifetime. And they look at you like, are you crazy? No, of course, the market backtracks, every 7 years we've talked about on average. So those are things that we try to point out to people that those illustrations aren't worth the paper they're put on, for that. But you can give these other ones where there's guaranteed rates of upwards of 5 to 6%, and the 4% rule goes out the window. Why would I not want to get more money from my assets?
And again, this is where you're stress testing the
Right.
plan, the blueprint that you've put
Right.
together. You've defined the expenses. You've examined those essential and discretionary spending. You've looked at things that are going to be factored in: taxation, inflation, healthcare expenses, and then we are putting together the plan for income generation and stress testing that. So again, that is the Protect and Grow written retirement blueprint. If you would like to get that put together for your situation, ladies and gentlemen, pick up the phone and give Tim Stearns, CFP, and TJ Stearns Inc. a call, 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256. But Tim, this reverse engineering backwards kind of approach to finance in retirement and income in retirement, rather than projections and speculation on future market returns, it seems to be a much more kind of concrete math-based approach as we are looking at spending and then reverse engineering the process.
Right. I mean, you're figuring out what the magic number is. Now, one thing we haven't talked about is that, a lot of people retire and they think they need this and that. Our plans are all dynamic. So usually we revisit them after a year to see kind of where they're falling in on their numbers. And I've been really happy with the numbers that, we have done. They seems like they're, we're coming in better than we had shown because we want to under promise, over perform for our clients, and I think some of these other companies kind of overpromise and people are left kind of underwhelmed.
Or over project again, like with Dave Ramsey projecting the market's going to do 12%. Um, and there are funds that certainly in certain years could and
Sure,
have done that, but that's taking
sure.
an awful lot of risk to try to achieve that as well. And not everybody's comfortable with the risk that would require. So, Tim, let's talk about some of the tools, right? We talked about the process of defining what is a good retirement income for us, and each person's going to have a different answer to that. But what are some of the tools available? You've mentioned dividend stocks, you've mentioned annuities, and those are
Yep.
just the tip of the iceberg here, right?
Right. We have other things, like exchange traded funds that we're going to put like a stop loss on. They have floors and that type of thing. We are very big on the active management. And, we've talked about this. Vanguard was a buy and hold shop. And nowadays they are buying up companies that actively manage their funds. So I think the writing is on the wall that the buy and hold doesn't work really anymore if they're doing it. And we've been doing it for years that we're going to be tactical, active, and making sure that we're not going to stay in a market that's falling.
Vanguard also uh, was traditionally very famous for do-it-yourself access to investment. And recently, a Vanguard paper, also surprisingly, Tim, reported that the value of having an advisor can add as much as 3% in
Saw that.
compound returns over time. So, yeah,
Right.
that active management, that working with that experienced, qualified professional to do things exactly like we're talking about here, formulate the plan, and then continue to monitor and adjust that plan over time to make sure it is dynamic and working in your favor, to analyze the tools that are available to you, the annuities, the dividend paying stocks, the stop losses, the stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs, and even real estate. Like all of these have a component, Tim, that is capable of being included, but we've got to weigh the pros and cons of each for our situation and our acceptance of the downside of each one of these.
Right. And one of the things we always ask people is, what do you think that S&P 500 has averaged since 2000? And man, I mean, the numbers are coming in at 8 to 12% a year. And you and I have talked about this. It's around 5%, so we need to really, I think we all want to be hopeful that we're going to make more than the average Joe, but that's not how the market is. And not only that, if you look at a lot of the ability that we've had to make money in the market, it's been seven different stocks, right? The Magnificent Seven, which some of them haven't been so magnificent. So we're making sure that our clients are diversified. Maybe we have some guaranteed money coming from the annuity, but we also have stop losses and active money management.
And Tim, you say that about the S&P returns over the last 25 years, right? Around
Yep.
5.7%. Below what a lot of people
Oh
think.
yeah.
But think about the last 25 years and then flash forward to the next 25 years that you will be living off of your money. Do you expect the next 25 years to be as good as the last 25 years have been. Over the last 25 years, the baby boomer generation, more than any other generation before them, has been saving and investing and putting money into the market. And Econ 101, supply and demand, as more people are buying, the prices of the market have gone up. Over the next 25 years, we are right now at the peak of baby boomer retirement, and those same people are going to be net sellers of assets and withdrawing, and we're going to have different pressures on the market. Is the market going to hold up the same way? So if you have concerns about that, wouldn't it make sense to look at and consider these lifetime guarantees that are available to us today that are so attractive for these payouts and income?
I would think so. For me, my peace of mind, that's why I did mine. The big thing is to make sure that if you want peace of mind, I want a guaranteed return, that's going to come into my bank account each month, that I know what I'm working with. It was really interesting. We have a client she's a retired postal worker. And she said, you know what the best thing is about my pension is that I can spend all my money and the next month they fill my bucket back up.
Shows back up.
Yeah. I will never know that, that feeling. So I wanted to make sure I will know that feeling. And that's why I did that. And I'll tell you what, the interest rates now are much better than when I did it in 2021.
Well, you and your professional certainly should talk about and walk through a retirement income scenario and analyze the current models and the retirement income generation plan that you have and stress test it, shoot holes in it, make sure that it's stable, or are there legs that are wobbly? Have you measured twice and cut once, and then formulate that plan. Dealing with a professional that has a specific focus on retirement, experienced and qualified in this area, and bringing all of the pieces together, ladies and gentlemen, that can be the difference in your lasting financial confidence. And that is why Tim Stearns, CFP, and the team from TJ Stearns Inc. put together the Protect and Grow Written Retirement Blueprint. If you'd like to get that put together, pick up the phone, give Tim Stearns CFP a call, 800-640-2256. That is 800-640-2256. 800-640-2256. Tim, I know this is one of the most important elements of the conversation and the planning process there at TJ Stearns Inc., and something that has given so many proactive planners and savers much more confidence in retirement, but so many more need that confidence. We need a plan.
I agree. And I think, if you don't have a plan, you're kind of defaulting to whatever the IRS wants, hoping things work out. I couldn't imagine going into retirement. We had a guy come in the other day who said, I want to retire. I don't know if I can. Those are the people we can help, and make sure that they understand, the proper process to get through it.
Yeah. And the question of, can you retire comfortably and confidently? Well, if the market helps me out and agrees with me, that is a hope. That is a wish. And certainly we do hope, but we want a plan for if that does not come to fruition, if that does not play out ideally. So that is the Protect and Grow Written Retirement Blueprint. Ladies and gentlemen, pick up the phone, give a call, get that conversation started, and then have a further conversation about your specifics, your goals, and map out that blueprint. 800-640-2256, 800-640-2256. Tim, we always appreciate the time here on Protect and Grow Chicagoland Retirement.
Thanks, Peter.
Tune into Chicagoland certified financial planner Tim Stearns' full radio program and visit tjstearns.com for many valuable resources, including other great episodes of Chicagoland Retirement. Be sure to subscribe.
Investment advisory services offered through Cornerstone Securities, LLC. The information presented on this program is provided for informational purposes only without warranty of accuracy, completeness, or suitability for particular purpose. This program is not intended to be and does not constitute financial, investment, legal, or tax advice. This information is general in nature, not specific enough to be construed as advice. You should not make any decision based on the information presented on this program without independent consultation with an appropriately licensed professional or competent advisor. Investment in securities or the market involves a potential risk for loss of principal. Trading, therefore, may not be suitable for all listeners. listeners. Annuity guarantees are based solely on the financial strength and claims-paying ability of the issuing company. Withdrawals or growth from annuities may be taxable as ordinary income in the year it is taken. Individuals should review contracts for specific details of the product's features and costs.